delighted to say that we have Helen Morgan MP here. I'm also delighted to say that we've got Stratford-on-Avon's next MP here, Manuela Pertugela. So this is how this is going to work. We should hopefully have a video in a couple of minutes, and then after that, Helen's going to come to the stage and just do a brief chat, tell you what's been going on, what she's been involved with. And then we're going to move to Manuela. Manuela's got some questions for Helen that she's going to ask, and that will include some of the questions that you've been submitting all day. So Manuela's got a nice pile of the questions that have been submitted. We will apologise in advance if we don't get to your question. You know how these things are, but we'll endeavour to get through as many of them as we possibly can. Let's see if this video is going to work.
Hi, I hope you're having an incredible time at conference. I'm just sorry I couldn't join you in person this year. Of course, in normal circumstances, we'd have been together in Brighton in September, but I think we made the right decision to cancel our autumn conference so we could properly mourn Her Majesty. Of course, that meant we missed out on a lot of political coverage during the conference season, but I'm pleased we got a lot more coverage, actually, of the speech I made just the other week. And I'm hoping that our spring conference in York will be an even bigger, more brilliant occasion. I hope to see you there so you can be, in the bar and networking, which is so great thing to do with a conference. Of course, today there's plenty to celebrate. And I particularly think of Helen Morgan and that amazing victory we had in North Shropshire last December. And what an amazing Liberal Democrat MP Helen Morgan is. So thank you, Helen. But also our council victories. Look at that impressive showing we had in the recent by-election in Penkridge. We went from not standing for 8 years to coming within 10 votes of winning. It shows you, let's stand wherever we possibly can. And I'm particularly thinking of the local election results we had in May. They were great, but I hope this coming May they can be even better. I do want to celebrate each and every one of you. You are our activists, the lifeblood of our party. We couldn't do what we do without you. So thank you to all of you. And particular thanks to the councillors. You champion your local residents and your local communities, even in these most challenging times. And when you're all out on the doorsteps talking to people, I'm sure you're hearing what I'm hearing from families and pensioners and business people. They're all suffering with the cost of living emergency, problems in the health service, and so on. And they feel really ignored by the Conservatives. They tell me they feel the Tories have got no plan, no clue, and offer no real leadership. Rishi Sunak's obviously trying to distance himself from his predecessors, but the absolute truth is, as we saw in the autumn statement, his government are still doing things that are extremely painful for the British public. The cost of living crisis, the mortgage problems, the food and energy bills, these are very real for people. And particularly the mortgage crisis, entirely the fault of the Conservatives. We need to make sure people recognise that. I think they do. I think they do blame the Conservatives. And that's a very important factor as we go forward. And I think although the faces of the top may change, all these problems are going to remain. And that presents a huge opportunity for us Liberal Democrats in seats across the West Midlands and elsewhere. Traditional Conservatives are pretty fed up. I think we found that, didn't we, in North Shropshire, even back in last December. Traditional Conservative voters, lifelong Conservative voters, were telling us they felt tired of being ignored, tired of being taken for granted. They felt the Conservatives were out of touch, and they felt that they were ready for change. So we must show, Liberal Democrats must show that we are listening to them, reflecting their concerns, and fighting for a fair deal for them, their families, and their communities. And whether that means tackling the ambulance waiting times crisis, or the difficulties getting a GP, or the cost of living issues, or school cuts to school budgets, whatever it may be, Liberal Democrats must fight for the fair deal that people need. And we have a perfect opportunity to do this, of course, next May, the local elections. We've got all-up elections in places like Warwickshire, Herefordshire and Worcestershire. And we can smash the blue wall there, but we've got to stand lots of candidates. So I'm sure you're already selecting your candidates if you've not selected them already, getting out on the doorsteps, speaking with voters, putting together those tailored leaflets and fundraising so we can make all of that happen. We do know what we have to do after all. We've done it before. Getting Liberal Democrats elected by really listening to people and local communities, by hearing their concerns and their frustrations and showing that we understand them, showing that we care about the things they care about and that we are fighting for a fair deal. So thank you for what you've done over so many months and years. Good luck next May. And I hope you have a great conference this weekend.
Okay, should we welcome Helen up now? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. It's lovely to see so many of you here and in this fabulous venue. I think it's a really superb venue, so well done to Jennifer and Yuki for organising what is a great event today. So it's just over 11 months since I had the opportunity to almost impale Tim Farron with a big orange pin on live national TV, and I'm relieved to this day that I didn't get him. And as you can probably imagine, it's been a really, really full-on, exhausting and challenging time to be a new MP. Certainly somebody who has to learn how to be an MP, but also somebody who's got to dig in their constituency and be ready for a general election. And certainly through most of that 11 months, we've had no idea when that general election might be. And there's been a number of occasions where it has felt as if it has going to be quite imminent. And I think Joe Harmer can testify that I was very exercised about not having enough state boards for quite a long period of the summer. So we've been waiting in this kind of political turmoil for 11 months now, and I think that's been exhausting, not only for people who work in that arena every day of their lives, but for everybody in the, all the public as well, because there hasn't been any stability, there hasn't been any opportunity to plan. It has felt like a very unstable period of British politics, and I think because of that, it's more important than ever that we work hard to get this lot out and bring about the stability that we need to go about our daily lives. So I'm not going to talk too much because I've been slightly upstaged by Ed, and I know you've got a big wad of questions that you want to ask me, but I was just going to touch on a couple of things. Being a new MP is a little bit like setting up your own business. On the day after the election team pack up the head office and go home, and you're left having to be a new MP with not very many people to help you, if any at all. Just to give you an idea, you have to find somewhere to live in London, you have to find somewhere to have an office in your constituency, you have to recruit a team of people to help you, you have to learn all the rules and regulations of being in Westminster. So it is a really, really steep learning curve. But I have loved every minute of it, and I'm extremely grateful to everyone here who came and helped and has given me this enormous opportunity and the privilege of a lifetime as well to represent the people of North Shropshire. So thank you to everybody who's given me this highly enjoyable but stressful and challenging job to do for the last 11 months. And we are working really hard in North Shropshire to make sure that it isn't just an 11-month job, to make sure that we have good Liberal Democrat representation in the West Midlands for the next parliamentary term as well. And for those of you that have council elections in May, I can report that just as in May 2021, it really does feel still as if we are very much pushing on an open door in these rural communities. It really does feel that traditional lifelong Conservative voters are genuinely feeling left behind by their party and looking for an alternative, and that if we work hard and convince those voters that we are genuine community champions, then they will vote for us. And so for those of you that have got elections in May, I want you to feel really, really optimistic and go out and knock on those doors, because I think you'll get a really positive response, and I think you'll find those votes easy to find. So I hope everybody's feeling motivated for the campaign that really needs to start now. And I think we felt in Shropshire that if it hadn't been for COVID, in our 2021 elections, we would have done a lot better. We just sort of got squeezed out by that early 21 lockdown. You may know as well that being one of 14 Lib Dem MPs means that you can't sit on your haunches and be a quiet backbencher. You've also got to take on a portfolio. So I have taken on the Levelling Up Housing and Communities portfolio, which means that I cover local government. So I'm hoping that the councillors in the room will keep me bombarded with their issues so that I'm doing a good job of raising those in Parliament and then at a national level and fighting your corner as well. So I think that's enough for me. I'm going to sit back down on the comfy chair and take the questions, I think. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. That was really inspiring and uplifting. And can I just say it's an honor for me to share the stage with you this afternoon. Now, during the day, we ask delegates to write down what they would like to ask you. So we got an excellent set of questions, and I shall now begin with a question from Jennifer Gray. What has been the most surprising thing about being an MP?
I think the most surprising thing actually is the level of chaos in your working day when you're in Westminster. So you would think that there was a fairly good timetable for what's going to happen during the day, but in actual fact, because of the surprise nature of ministerial statements and urgent questions granted by the Speaker, you can have been planning to do something at 2 o'clock and you find that actually you're not on till 5. Or you can be planning to have had a meeting, say, at 1:30, but actually you've got to be in the chamber responding to a ministerial statement or urgent question. And so you're constantly rejigging your diary during the day, and it feels very, 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 very chaotic. And that really surprised me. And I always think when I see MPs in the chamber how sort of calm and collected and prepared they look. And now I know that behind the scenes, there's been a massive sort of, oh gosh, we've got to go and talk about, just trying to think of an example. Last week, I had to go and talk about the quality of social housing at almost no notice. And you have to come up with a good question that you think no one else will have asked. And so there's a lot of sort of last minute work going on. And that really surprised me. I thought there would be much more time to prepare for things.
So what would be the best way for us, councillor, contacting you about the issues that we have? Because I think I see my colleagues here, I sit on the district council as well, and we got town councillor, and, social housing is an issue, the whole thing. So is it your Lib Dem email so we can send you questions and issues?
The LGA is probably the best way to go about that. So we have a fortnightly meeting with our representatives from the LGA where they tell me and the equivalent spokespeople in the House of Lords, which is essentially Kath Pinnock, and one or two other members of the House of Lords. They tell us what their issues are, and we work out how we're going to respond to those, what the appropriate campaigning to do is. So if you go through your LGA rep, that's probably the best way to go about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So the next question is from Ed Francis. What is the Lib Dem route map and time scale to get back into Europe? Or is this now off the agenda?
I think that's a really interesting question. I don't think it is off the agenda. And I think if we look at the response to the mini budget and the recent budget on Thursday, and the discussion that people are having now about the drop in living standards and the economic damage that Brexit has done, I think now is a good time for us to say we need to have a trading relationship with Europe that is free of red tape. And so I think, we always have to be careful that we're not the kind of smug Remainers telling people they got things wrong, because they won't vote for us if we do that. And that's a very important message, I think, to remember. So we don't necessarily want to kind of bang on about Brexit, but I think we do want to start saying, we need to remove this red tape. We need to allow our exporters to export and trade with Europe. And I think the moment where we talk more about that roadmap will come. But I think nor do we want to be the party that instigates another huge and damaging, divisive discussion over Europe. Because whatever your views are on Brexit, and I'd imagine ours are all fairly similar, the damaging nature of that divisive, nasty debate that we had over it, I don't think is something that we would want to repeat. So I think if we talk about the issue sensibly, I think it will become obvious as time progresses that we need to have a closer relationship. So I think we can talk about it sensibly without alienating a big chunk of the electorate.
Yeah, and I think there is real anger now, especially with small businesses, that they were promised to cut the red tape. Actually, what they're finding is that there is lots of red tape and lots of cost towards this red tape and bureaucracy and barriers. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm probably, as somebody who won in a Leave voting seat, I'm the one person who's always, very nervous about mentioning it because I don't want to, reopen those wounds, essentially, in North Shropshire. But I think, firstly, you have to be honest. Like, I would never tell anybody that I thought Brexit was a good idea because that would be dishonest, and that's not who I am. But when I'm asked about it, I say, I think we need to be able to trade better with Europe. I think we need to start removing some of the red tape that has been put in place. And I think that's an honest and sensible way to start opening that discussion.
Thank you. So the next question is from Rebecca. And you know that sadly we've been hearing of sleaze and bullying in Westminster. So it's a very timely question. And Rebecca stressed, outside the Liberal Democrat Party, how sexist, racist, bullying are other parliamentary members, and what is the worst thing you have seen?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think the worst things I've seen have actually been in the Chamber live broadcast to the nation. I think we've seen some of the language that Suella Braverman used about the invasion of the South Coast. I think we've seen some of the language used by Lee Anderson. I think it's horrifying. I think it's inflammatory. And I think it's something that, that they should be ashamed of, frankly. We have this really, really tense situation where large numbers of people who've arrived on the South Coast are being put in hotels in people's constituencies. And there is going to be pressure on local services as a result of that situation. And to use that kind of language really puts those people in a very vulnerable situation, and I think it's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, how can they get away with it as well? That what upsets me, that they have this platform and they spout these horrible views which put people in danger. Yeah. So it's just shocking, really, that our elected parliamentarians behave like that. Exactly.
And I think when you think about some of the other elements of sleaze, some of the stuff you read in the paper about the way people behave in the bar and stuff, to be honest with you, I don't hang out in the bar with 20-year-old researchers, so I don't really see it. I'm sure it goes on, but I have to say, not my social scene. So.
Thank you. So I have a question from Adam now. Who is your favorite Labour MP?
So I think the Labour MPs we have an interesting relationship with. Obviously, we're often in the same lobby as them, or mostly in the same lobby as them, so you do get to know them and talk to them. My favourite Labour MP is Tan Desi. He's the MP for Slough. He's absolutely lovely, just the loveliest, friendliest man, and a real character as well. Full of life and always in a good mood. I haven't had any particular issues with any of them. They're all sort of reasonably friendly and civil. But I think Tan is my favourite. I'm also a big fan of Thangam Debano. I think she's fabulous. She's really funny, and she's really friendly and warm person as well.
Okay. Well, you know what's coming next. From Sam, who is your favourite Tory MP?
No, I don't think I have one of those. So you have to, well, you don't have to, but most MPs sit on all party parliamentary groups with obviously MPs from all of the parties. And it's very striking that when you're in those groups, the tenor of the debate and the behaviour of people is much more grown up and civilised and professional, as you would hope it would be all the time. And so I'm in APPGs with on the maternity services APPG and the baby loss APPG with Sherilyn McCrory, who's in probably one of our targets in Cornwall, and Jill Mortimer, who was the by-election winner in Hartlepool. And I have to say I get on very well with both of them. But that said, I often feel a sense of incredulity, actually, that when I talk to these people, you know, about things like baby loss and maternity services, where all of the issues that have arisen, you know, particularly in somewhere like Shropshire, where we've had this huge scandal, a large chunk of the issues have arisen because of maternity services are underinvested in. And you can sit in these evidence sessions and hear these harrowing stories, and these two women will be really moved by those stories, but then go, well, you know, more money isn't the answer. And I just find it extraordinary, you know, because more money into those services absolutely is the answer. And I'm often surprised by people who seem to be very warm, sensible, empathetic people who can sort of flick their Tory switch and say, oh, well, we can't possibly invest in it. I find it very odd.
Okay, no, thank you. And in fact, you touch upon the health service. Now you represent a rural area in the West Midlands, and what are the challenges facing your communities, and how are you helping to solve these now that you are their parliamentary representative?
Well, I think anybody that came to North Shropshire last year will have known that the top issue is ambulance waiting times, and unfortunately that is still our top issue. I think it has a lot more profile now because of the by-election and because of the messaging, and because my team and myself have continually banged the drum on that issue, because it's the one issue that really, really matters to people. And I think we found out a little bit more about it. So this time last year, our community ambulance stations had closed, and it was sort of a knee-jerk reaction really to say, well, of course you're waiting longer for an ambulance if the ambulance is starting from further away. But as we've sort of learned more about it and engaged more with the ambulance service, it's become very obvious that the problem is actually in social care, which causes bed blocking, which causes ambulances to queue outside the hospital. And there's a real crisis in social care that is knocking on into the rest of the, certainly, well, into the plan care service as well, but into the emergency service. And we've just tried to kind of keep engaging the government on that issue. But it has been really hard because we've had, I've lost track of how many health secretaries since I was elected. And we just had a point where we were going to have the health minister, who at the time was Edward Arger, who was going to come and visit Shropshire. And I guess give the Tory MPs the credit for a lot of the work that I'd done. But then he resigned because of, in the Boris Johnson sort of final throes saga that we had in July, we've had 2 different health secretaries again, and then one of them's come back in. And so there's no continuity, and it's very hard to build up a campaign. But just to keep raising awareness of it, really. I mean, I did a shift with West Midlands Ambulance Service, which was fascinating, a full 12 hours. And, you know, the problems are deep-rooted, but we can't fix any of that unless we focus on actually what's happening in local authorities and social care, because that's where all the problem is stored up, essentially.
No, thank you. I think you touched upon, I mean, I had a question for you. How challenging is to be an opposition MP with a government which obviously has been dysfunctional, but also, although they're deeply factional and divided, they still command a huge majority in the House. So, you know, how challenging, and, you know, can you make a difference?
I think you can. I mean, if you look in Shropshire, we had 5 Conservative MPs for a long period of time. And as soon as there was a change, as soon as we won the by-election, suddenly the other 4 Conservative MPs sort of came out of the woodwork and started talking about ambulance services. So sort of clearly rattled, clearly wanting to demonstrate to their own constituents that they were willing to work hard. And so it has made a real difference. It's made a difference, I think, to everyone in Shropshire because their MPs are being a little bit more visible and a little bit more active now. Obviously, it's frustrating when you vote not to win those votes. You know, we traipsed through the lobby 16 times one day and obviously, as expected, lost every single vote. And that can be a bit soul-destroying. But if you keep at it, you can make a difference. And, you know, that's what campaigning's about, isn't it? You don't just say, oh, well, I think you need to sort this out, and then they sort it out. You've just got to keep banging the drum. And eventually you'll be listened to. So it's hard work, it's a long game, but you've just got to stick at it.
Keep going at it, thank you. So you represent a rural constituency, not dissimilar from Stratford-on-Avon. So the next question is from Tom Holmes. What can we do in Stratford to build on our strong second place and get a Lib Dem MP elected at the next general election?
So you need to work on your bar charts. I think that's very important. And it's funny, and we talk a lot about bar charts, but actually the reason we were able to be the credible challenger in North Shropshire was that we had a good bar chart from the local elections in the previous May. If we hadn't done that, we would never have been able to convince people that we could win in December. So sounds a bit of a cliche, but you just need to make it obvious that you're the credible challenger. And that means get your leaflets out, put a Labour squeeze message and a Green squeeze message on every single leaflet, and just make it clear that you're the challenger. And it's really interesting because if we look at national polling at the moment, it's a little bit depressing. We haven't got into the numbers that we would want to be at. But there was some red wall polling that came out last week from Redfield Wilton, and it shows that in blue wall polling, and it shows that in blue wall seats we're doing really, really, really well. So what we're seeing in those national numbers, we think, is an anti-conservative sentiment. But when we knock on doors, we're finding that Labour vote quite soft. And if we're a credible challenger, we can get people to vote for us, definitely. And I went up to Chester for the by-election last weekend. And obviously Chester is considered to be a Labour safe seat. But even there, you know, we're getting good response on the doorstep, and that Labour vote is soft. So, you know, remember the Labour squeeze message on every single leaflet and get lots of leaflets out and campaign on things that matter to your community. Because ultimately, when you knock on doors, no one's interested in national issues. They're interested in the things that affect them day to day. They want to be able to know an ambulance is coming if they're ill. They want their potholes fixed. They want their kids well educated. They want to be able to see a GP. And if you can campaign on things that matter to people, then they'll recognise that you care about them and they'll vote for you.
Okay, no, that's encouraging, and we will heed that advice, definitely, in Stratford.
Get your bar chart on every leaflet.
So, a question from me. So, in your maiden speech in Parliament, you spoke about the Judicial Review and Courts Bill. And we know that, and actually we heard about this earlier on from the PPC for Tamworth, Sunny Virk, in his excellent presentation to us. So judicial reviews are hugely important tools for citizens to hold government's decision to account. Can you tell us a bit more about these and your campaign, and give us an update on what's happening and how we can fight this?
Well, the Judicial Review and Courts Bill got rid of a specific mechanism called CART Judicial Review, which is really, really important for people who have been had their asylum claim rejected and are due to be deported, because the government the government loses in a high proportion of those cases, and for the individuals involved, they're often life or death situations, and if they get sent back to where they've come from, the stakes could not be higher for those individuals. So even though the government considers them to be expensive, they consider them to be, you know, inefficient, they are actually quite rare, and the stakes couldn't be higher for the individuals involved. So it's a really kind of core liberal principle, really, that you can double check, that you can go back and ensure that that decision is lawful. Unfortunately, that bill has passed and passed through the House of Commons, along with a lot of other legislation which is fundamentally authoritarian and absolutely opposed to our values. I mean, you know, there's little bits in all sorts of bits of legislation that are horrifying. You know, the police and crime bill and the clampdown on protest, the judicial review and courts bill. There's been a raft of legislation that really is really worrying, I think, for a Liberal. Why did I choose to do my maiden speech in that debate? You know, partly because you want to get your maiden speech done so that you can take part in other debates, because you can't do that until you've done it. So partly kind of timing, but because it was a sort of a core Liberal concern, it seemed like a good moment for me to do my maiden speech and get everybody in the chamber to support that speech, but also to talk about the amendment that Vera had put in to keep CART judicial review.
Okay, thank you, Helen. What do you do in your free time to relax? Or have you got any free time?
I don't have a load of free time, I'll be honest with you. So I used to be a keen runner. I have to say I've lost all running momentum. So I'm not doing any running at the moment, which is a real shame. I quite like gardening, so tomorrow I'll be out in the garden raking up leaves. And I really like animals, to the horror of my team that I've recruited here. None of them are really animal-y, and I'm the one who's constantly saying, oh, can we visit the animal rescue or the the exotic animal farm or whatever. So I have 2 cats, and they're very young, so I'm at the sort of the stages at the moment of teaching them to use the cat flap and persuading them to go outside, that kind of thing. So yeah, just kind of family things, gardening and the cats, and try and catch up with my friends for coffee occasionally. But that, you know, it is hard to fit it all in when you've only really got one day a week off. So.
Okay, thank you. That's good. That's good that you are relaxing a little bit as well. I think we got 10 minutes, and I would like to open to the floor. So if you have any question, I don't know whether Jennifer is Jennifer here, but I can come out and yes. So can I give the microphone? So the gentleman over there.
I think Nuki's about to.
Yeah. I can give you my
facilitate.
Yeah. Thank you, Nuki. Brilliant, thank you. There's a gentleman over there, I think.
Thank you. It's about education. Recently, I saw a poll showing that the general public, only about 6% of them are interested in education policy when it comes to who they vote for. I personally think education, and I think everybody in the party does, is a real key issue, and there is now a surge among experts of feeling that there is need for radical change in our education system. But how, given the general public situation, how can we as a party include a strong message about education in our campaigning?
I think that's a really good question, and we had a really interesting discussion about that as a parliamentary party, because obviously we feel passionately about education. It's actually the entire answer to the growth problem that the country faces, and it isn't high up people's priorities at the moment, I think, because it isn't seen to be in crisis. And so many other important services are seen to be in crisis. So if you look at the health service, that's affecting people day to day, and they perceive a crisis. Whereas if you look at schools, most people's children are going to school. And although there's problems in that area, you know, teachers in particular are working really, really hard, and they're patching up a lot of the holes in other types of service. You know, they're covering off mental health and social services and all sorts of things. And so I don't think people perceive a crisis. So at the moment, it's sort of slipped down the priority list. And I think if you look at the cost of living as well, if you're worrying about putting your heating bill on, but your kids are getting off to school every day and they come home again, it just seems like less of an issue. That's my perception. But it does need to be moved up the agenda, because we can't move forward with the labour shortages that we've got and with the economic issues that we've got if we don't focus on education and skills. So I think it is really important. And so I think it's the right thing for us to be talking about, even if it's not necessarily, you know, ticking the box of you know, picking off the top concerns of voters.
Any other question?
You couldn't have given me a break Well, Helen, I'm going to just say something about one of the factors in your election and the success of it, and the Conservatives, the way the Conservatives have alienated the farming community. Now, currently, we are looking at renewing our policy because we've got a policy working group that's sitting at the moment. I'm a member of it, and it's chaired by Stuart Roberts, who actually stood down from the National Farmers Union, where he was deputy president, in order to get involved in party politics, and he's chairing our review of policy. Generally, what the Tories did was try to change all the way the payments work without any understanding of the limitations of the World Trade Organization, and they've left a complete mess. So could you just say something about the opportunities we have in the rural seats across the country, not just in North Shropshire, in terms of gaining the farming vote?
I think we've got a huge opportunity, actually, because I think the change in incentive payments from the basic payment to the sustainable farming incentive has been an unmitigated disaster. The numbers that came out last week, I think, were 2,000 farmers have applied out of 83,000 farmers. And if you talk to them, they'll tell you it's too expensive up front, it's too difficult to apply for, we just can't be bothered, essentially, it's not worth it. And there's real anger about that. And then the Australia and New Zealand trade deals have caused huge amounts of anger as well. And astonishingly, last week, George Eustace, who was the DEFRA secretary when those deals were negotiated, said that he thought they were pretty poor deals and that Liz Truss had done a pretty poor job and, you know, thrown away the baby with the bathwater to get those deals signed. So there's definitely a sense among the farming community that they've been bargained away. And when you go to other types of meetings, so I went to a farming APPG a couple of weeks ago, I would say that the minister, who I think is Mark Spencer, I think that's who it was, I can't remember. I think it's Mark Spencer. I think he was completely out of touch with what they were telling him in that meeting. It was actually quite astonishing. So I think there's a genuine sense that DEFRA don't understand what farmers are going through, and we should absolutely be targeting that vote, because I think we've got a strong offering, and I think Tim in particular, and hopefully now backed up by Richard Ford and myself, have been really at the forefront of highlighting the issues that they're facing and highlighting the issues highlighting the fact that the government has lost the plot really with the farming industry. So really, really important that we target that farming message and that rural vote.
I think Manuela is signalling to me we have time for two more. Is that right?
We've got 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
More, so I think the gentleman with the red jacket.
Yep. And then I can see David's got his hand up, so I think David would be our last one.
Helen, you mentioned Europe, and you said we need to campaign to get rid of the red tape. But surely there's only one way to get rid of the red tape, and that's to join the common market.
Well, I think that's right, but I think we need to soften our messaging about that, because we do have to be cognizant of the fact that we are dealing with a really, really divisive issue, and we have tried it once and it wasn't successful for us. So I think we need to kind of build a consensus behind what we're trying to say, and you don't do that by charging in like a bull in a china shop and saying, we're right, this is what we should do. I think you start to build that consensus by saying, what are the problems facing our exporting businesses? Well, the problems are, we do have a largely tariff-free deal, but the problems are around paperwork and red tape. People can understand that message very easily. And then once you've got everyone to accept that that's the problem, then we can start maybe to talk about some of the solutions. But I think it's an issue that we need to bring people along with us and not just tell them that we're right, because I don't think that will work. And I think if we make the case in a considered and intelligent way, then we can build a consensus to come along with us.
Just a question I've got is about You came third place in general election, and how to win over farmers. I mean, I came third place in Bromsgrove. All our councillors are in the centre. How to connect with farmers, and because I think they're natural libdems, they may not know it yet.
I think they are. I think certainly when you meet the farming community in Shropshire, they're very much people who recognise that no two lives are lived the same, and that people just need to be allowed to get on with what they need to do. So I think they are quite a liberal bunch of people at heart, actually. Connecting with them is hard work. It's important, I think, to contact your local NFU and set up meetings and just listen to what they've got to say. They want to be listened to. And I think we have to be quite careful about some of our environmental messaging, because although that's really important, farmers are very sensitive to the idea that we offshore our problem by sort of rewilding their farms and buying food in from abroad. They rightly see that as the wrong way to deal with an environmental challenge. So if we can recognise that the farming industry is at the cutting edge of solving our environmental challenges, and listen to what they've got to say and work with them to do that, that's a message that resonates really strongly. The other thing that really comes across is, they want some direction, because for years farmers were told you've just got to produce as much food as you possibly can and sort of hang the consequences. So they followed a very strong policy from the EU and from our own government, and now they're being told, well, you've got to protect biodiversity and improve the environment. Oh, but food security is a big issue as well. And I think they want to see some direction on that. I think they want somebody to say, this is kind of a strategy of where we're going. And that resonates very strongly as well. And certainly something that came across very strongly when I was in an APPG the other week is that they want to be told, across the country, give us an idea of what we're aiming at in terms of productive land for food and land to be used for energy crops and land for tree planting and so on and so forth. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to work with them, but listen to them and recognise that their endeavour to produce food and feed us and protect the environment is one that we understand and that we'll work with them on.
Hello, Helen. For me, it's more about sort of campaigning. Before you got elected, you were out knocking on doors, you were talking to people, you were spending a lot of time. Now, as an elected MP, you're in a lot of demand. Apart from your MP job, people like us want you to come and talk to us at conference. How do you actually find the time to still be seen and door knock in your own constituency? Because ultimately, we want you to get re-elected.
Well, I think the annual dinner and AGM season is quite tough, to be quite honest with you. But we do get out I get out most weekends and go and door knock. And we try and, obviously, North Shropshire is a big area. So if we do a visit in Oswestry, then after that, we'll try and do a bit of door knocking. And I've structured my team so that they are essentially partly paid by IPSA to do my MP work with me and partly paid by the party so that they can come and knock doors afterwards, which is quite important. And obviously we've built up those volunteer networks as well. But door knocking is still my favourite thing to do. And now we have this great scenario, and it happens almost every time we go out, where one of the team knock on the door and say, I'm here with Helen, and somebody will go, MP never comes out here. And I can go, I'm at the end of your drive. And it's great. It's really good fun. I really, that's my favourite thing. But yeah, no, you have to do it. And if you don't knock on doors, people firstly don't believe that you're out there. And secondly, you get quite disconnected when you're down in London for 3 days a week. So it's really important to carry on doing.
Thank you, Helen. It's a brilliant conversation this afternoon. Can you please give a round of applause to Helen Morgan? Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to the audience for their very, very good questions. Give yourself a round of applause as well.